Every town has a dark side. The word angel comes from the Greek word angelos, which literally means messenger. NYC police officer Ralph Sarchie doesn't consider himself an angel at all, but he most certainly has a message to tell all of us. Now, Sarchie doesn't see himself as a hero or a ghost hunter. He's just a person, but in his view, his role isn't just to confront bad guys on the streets. It's to hunt down evil at the source and to warn people that it's very real in the truest sense of the word. Hey guys, it's Andrew. Welcome to Everytown, where today we're checking out what happens during those calls that come into 911 at 3 in the morning from families and individuals who are experiencing things that they don't understand but are terrified. We're talking shadows in the corner of rooms, voices that shouldn't be there, and the man who helped them and went on to become one of the most well-respected demonologists the country has ever known. And this is The Devil in New York, how a cop became a demon hunter. The year was 1980. Ronald Reagan hadn't yet been elected president. John Lennon was still alive. And in the South Bronx, a young officer named Ralph Sarchie was just beginning his career with the New York City Police Department. The 46th Precinct, Sarchie's future post, was known as one of the toughest in the entire city. Drugs, murders, armed robberies, you name it. Violence was just a part of the landscape here. Every shift, officers walked into stations that could turn deadly in seconds, and Sarchie was trained to deal with the worst things people could do to one another. But nothing in that training could have prepared him for what he'd face one Halloween night 11 years later. Before we get there, though, we need to look at something else. Something happening miles away in a quiet Connecticut town. That same summer, July of 1980, an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel moved with his family into a rental home in Brookfield, Connecticut. On the surface, it was just another New England house. It sat back from the road a bit, framed by tall trees and chip white paint. Nothing about it stood out, but as soon as they unpacked the first box, David grew quiet. He said the place just didn't feel right. After a few weeks had passed, he told his family about the old man who appeared to him inside his room. But this wasn't someone who was alive, and he understood that. The figure looked almost human, but his skin, his eyes, and the way he moved, nothing about it felt natural. And David said the man spoke only once, warning that if his family stayed there, they would suffer greatly.
I said to David, "What is this figure telling you?" He keeps telling me, "Beware." I said, "Beware of what?" And he kept telling me, "He wants my soul."
At first, no one took it seriously. They figured David was just trying to get out of helping clean up the place, or maybe it was just a kid seeing a shadow and turning it into a monster. The thing is, though, David's visions didn't wane. It was the opposite, and they got worse. Soon he began having violent episodes that terrified his parents. He spoke in voices that weren't his own. He growled, hissed, and claimed something was inside him. Red marks then appeared on his neck, as if invisible hands were tightening around his throat. His small body would twist and contort in ways that nobody could explain. It got to the point where at night his family took turns staying awake, holding him through the spasms and convulsions. And this wasn't a boy acting out at all, and it wasn't his imagination. Whatever was happening to David, it was real, and he was in trouble. And before long, it would pull Ralph Sarchie into a world he never even believed existed. The Glatzels were a Catholic family, and when something happened that couldn't be explained, they did what their faith taught them to do. They called a priest. The priest listened carefully, but it didn't take long for him to realize this was beyond anything he'd been trained to handle. So he reached out to two people who had built their reputations on confronting the things the church often avoided, Ed and Lorraine Warren. You've probably heard about them before. By 1980, the Warrens were already household names in certain circles. Ed called himself a demonologist, though he wasn't ordained or formally trained by the church. His education came from years in the field, documenting claims of hauntings and possession. Lorraine, his wife, described herself as clairvoyant, and she claimed to see and sense what others couldn't. Spiritual presences, emotions that lingered in a room long after people were gone. Together, they'd investigated thousands of alleged hauntings, the Amityville case among them. When they walked into the Glatzel home, they both said they felt it immediately. A heaviness in the air and a darkness that seemed to center specifically around David.
And when we got in the house, we were sitting there at the table talking, and he would be doodling, drawing or something like that, and he'd be concentrating, and then he would look up, and it was no longer a little 11-year-old boy.
Lorraine later described seeing a black mist form beside the boy, twisting in the corner of the room. The family said they watched helplessly as David was thrown to the ground by something they couldn't see, but Lorraine could. His small body bruised and battered, the kid was quoting lines from the Bible and even from Paradise Lost, words he'd never read or even heard before. After days of observation with all this going on, the Warrens made their conclusion. David wasn't just tormented, he was possessed, and not by one spirit, but several.
Get out of this. Get out of my son. Get out of my son. Come on. Come on, son. Son, get up. Get away from my son. No! I'm your mother. David. David. Wake up. Get up. Get up. My God, get up.
From there, they arranged for a series of exorcisms under the supervision of the church, 3 in total. During one of those rituals, something unexpected happened. David's older sister's boyfriend, Arnie Johnson, was there. He was 19, steady and protective, and he loved David like a younger brother. And watching the boy thrash and scream, Arnie reached a breaking point, and he shouted at the unseen presence tormenting David, daring it to face him instead. "Leave him alone," he screamed, "and come into me." According to those who were there, something in the room shifted after that. The mood changed. And from that moment on, everyone who knew Arnie said he was never the same. He began losing track of time. He'd slip into strange trances, and his voice would change. His temper, once even and calm, it grew unpredictable. The Warrens took the warning seriously. In October of 1980, they did something they rarely did. They reached out to local law enforcement. They told the Brookfield Police Department that the young man in their town was under the influence of something dangerous, something beyond human control. But police don't act on hunches from ghost hunters, though months later, they'd learned they should have. Every town has a dark side, and so do most cheap mattresses. They start out fine, but before long you're stuck with sagging foam, sleepless nights, and a bed that's seen better days. But GhostBed does things differently. GhostBed is a family-run company founded by mattress-making experts with more than 20 years of experience. They've taken everything they've learned and built a collection of mattresses designed to last, with premium materials, proven cooling technology, and construction that truly supports your body over time. Each GhostBed mattress features ProCore technology, a targeted support layer that reinforces the center of the mattress where your body's heaviest. It keeps your spine aligned and relieves pressure and helps you wake up feeling rested instead of sore. And unlike other brands, GhostBed keeps things simple. Premium quality at up to 50% less than comparable names, thanks to smart manufacturing and efficient logistics, not hype or hidden markups. You'll also get a 101 night sleep trial, a 20 to 25-year warranty, and fast free shipping. Most orders arrive in 2 to 5 days, so you could be sleeping better by next week. Right now, during GhostBed's Black Friday sale, you can get 25% off site-wide, plus a free massaging neck pillow with your mattress purchase. Just go to ghostbed.com/etown and use promo code ETOWN at checkout. That's ghostbed.com/etown, promo code ETOWN, and upgrade your sleep with GhostBed, the makers of the coolest beds in the world. Some exclusions apply. See site for details. There's something my parents say every time I visit. Take more pictures while you're here. We never have enough. And they're right. Life moves fast, and even when you stay in touch, distance has a way of catching up with all of us. That's why an Aura frame ended up being one of the easiest gifts I've ever given them. It feels personal without needing anything complicated behind it. I've been using one myself, and the thing I appreciate most is how natural it is to share moments the second they happen. Whenever I take a good picture or a little video, I can share it to the Aura frame instantly, no matter where I am. And this is the best part. Before my parents' gift frame even shipped, I loaded it with old family photos, the kind that sit buried in phones never to be seen again. Aura lets you preload everything, and you can even add a message that appears the first time they turn it on. It turns the unboxing into a moment, not just a present. Every frame comes in a premium gift box, no price tag, nothing extra needed. Just a gift that'll make people feel closer to you, even when you're not in the same room, which is really all they want anyway. For a limited time, visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code EVERYTOWN at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code EVERYTOWN. This exclusive Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so order now before it ends. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. On February 16, 1981, Arnie got into an argument with his landlord, Alan Bono, at the Brookfield Kennels where Bono worked as a manager. And what started as a small disagreement over lunch and drinks escalated fast. Witnesses said Bono suddenly became agitated. Maybe he had one too many beers, and before anyone could step in, the argument spilled outside. Moments later, Arnie pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed Bono several times in the chest and stomach. The landlord stumbled out across the road, collapsed on a lawn, and died there before help could arrive. Police arrested Johnson about an hour later. To them, it looked like a straightforward case. A young man in a burst of anger made a fatal mistake. But the next day, the story took a turn no one could have expected. The Warrens contacted police again, and they told investigators that Arnie hadn't been in control of himself when he committed the crime. Their call held a little more weight now, since they had tried to warn them. They said that the same entity that had once possessed young David, the one Johnson had challenged and invited into himself, had taken over. Because of all the documentation leading up to this case, Johnson's attorney decided to do something unprecedented in American legal history, and he would argue that his client was not guilty by reason of demonic possession.
A defense attorney in Connecticut will try to prove his client is not guilty of murder because the 19-year-old defendant allegedly said that he was possessed by the devil at the time of the killing.
When the trial began on October 28th of '81, Judge Robert Callahan refused to allow it. The court, he said, could not and would not accept the supernatural as a legal defense. If it did, where would the law draw the line? It would be like allowing the witch trials to happen all over again, and he's not wrong. Still, the case was quickly dubbed the Devil Made Me Do It trial. It captured national attention and it blurred the boundaries between faith, fear, and the limits of the justice system. On November 24th of '81, after weeks of testimony, the jury found Arnie guilty of first-degree manslaughter and sentenced him to prison. Though interestingly, he would only serve 5 years before being released on good behavior, and he married David's sister, and they remained that way until her passing in 2021. And while the Johnson case was grabbing national headlines, Ralph Sarchie was back in New York, quietly building his career with the NYPD. And he married, started a family, and welcomed his first daughter into the world. And life was moving forward. Long hours on the job, sleepless nights at home. But somewhere in the middle of it all, something in Ralph began to shift. He found himself drawn back to the Catholic faith he'd grown up with. He started going to Mass again, praying more, and thinking seriously about the idea of good versus evil. And not as abstractions, but as real forces moving through the world we all live in. And then one day he picked up a book that would change everything for him. It was called Satan's Harvest, an account of possession case investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. The book described their work in chilling detail, the rituals, the confrontations, their belief that evil wasn't metaphorical but physical, capable of taking hold of a person's life. And something about it spoke deeply to Sarchie, and it bled over into his work.
When I'm working as a cop, I'm dealing primarily with secondary evil. I'm out here hunting for the bad guys. And then when I'm doing the work, I'm actually fighting evil at the source.
He then struck up a friendship with a local priest who shared his interest in the spiritual side of police investigations. Whenever the priest received reports of possible demonic activity, well, he'd call Sarchie and ask if he wanted to come along. And of course he did. And that was the beginning of what he would come to call the work. His quiet, off-the-clock mission to confront what he believed were the darker forces moving through New York City, the true root of evil. It was Halloween night, 1991, when the call came in. By now, word had gotten around about Ralph's mission, and a priest up north contacted Sarchie with a case he said couldn't wait. A family in Westchester, the Villanovas, were experiencing things in their home that had gone far beyond the ordinary. And Sarchie and his partner, Joe Forrester, got in the car and headed up there. When they arrived, the Villanovas looked exhausted, pale, frightened, and it was clear they hadn't slept in days, and they told the officers everything. It had started that fall when the mother in the family, Gabby Villanova, saw a woman standing in the corner of her bedroom. The figure appeared out of a cloud of white smoke, just for a moment, then vanished. And Gabby was the only one who could see her, at least at first. But soon, the woman began speaking through Gabby. Her voice would change, her tone and her mannerisms, like someone else had taken over. A family friend named Ruth tried to help, talking to the presence through Gabby. That's when the spirit told an elaborate story that she was a woman who'd been murdered on her wedding night in that home, and her fiancé had been wrongly accused. But the story was really only part of it, because the house itself had turned hostile. Books flew from shelves, heavy thuds shook the walls, and furniture moved on its own. Low moans drifted up from the basement when no one was down there, and the word help even appeared scrawled backwards across the bathroom mirror. And then came the injuries, bruises, scratches, cuts appearing out of nowhere. The Villanovas were terrified, and they had young children, including a daughter named Luciana, and Gabby was acting less and less like the mom they knew with every day that passed. That's when they called the priest, and the priest called Sarchie. Inside the home, Sarchi and Forrester said they witnessed the activity firsthand. Objects moving, unexplainable noises, and a presence they couldn't account for. But what unsettled them most was Gabby herself, the way she stared as if something else was looking out from behind her eyes. Now, both men had seen plenty in their years on the force, but nothing like this, so they made a decision. They would try to help the only way they knew how, and they would perform an exorcism. They had come prepared: holy water, crucifixes, and prayers, the same words the Catholic Church had used for centuries to drive out whatever it called evil. The ritual began. Low chants filled the Villanova home, echoing off the walls, commanding the entity to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. And then, right in the middle of it, Gabby went rigid. Her voice changed, and her face worked into something that wasn't hers. In that instant, the men knew this was beyond something they could control. This was something far stronger and far darker. And they stopped the ritual out of fear of making things worse, and they really needed help. When they finally returned, they brought seasoned exorcists with them, people who had faced this kind of force before. Together, they moved through the Villanova house room by room, performing prayers and blessings. It took hours. Every wall, every doorway, every inch of the house was prayed over. And finally, when the air grew still and the atmosphere seemed to lift, they knew it was gone. The Villanova family was free. After the Villanova case, priests began calling Sarchi whenever they encountered situations that needed not just faith, but someone who could stand firm under pressure. Other demonologists reached out too. And before long, Ed and Lorraine Warren called from Washington, D.C. They needed Sarchi's help with a case that had gripped the Capitol. The Mackenzie family had lived in fear for 6 years. Their home was plagued by voices on the phone that mimicked their deceased father. They'd hear a baby crying from empty rooms. Objects hurled themselves across the house, and they too were bruised, scratched, and tormented night after night. When Sarchi arrived, he began to dig into the property's history and found something very interesting. That house had once belonged to a Satanist, a man who conducted rituals there, deliberately summoning dark forces. The Mackenzies had no idea about that when they moved in. And Sarchi and the team began a series of exorcisms, not just for the family, but for the house itself. And the sessions went on for weeks, and eventually, the disturbances stopped. A year later, the Mackenzies reported that their home was quiet again. The 6 years of terror were finally over. And for Ralph Sarchi, his work, had truly begun. And from there, he would go on to work like this for the next several years. Police work on one side, exorcisms on the other, and oftentimes the two types of work overlapped. While this was happening, of course, plenty of people were still skeptical. I mean, how does a cop even become a demonologist? Law enforcement culture, after all, is built on logic and evidence, on things you can see, measure, or explain. So when an officer says they've witnessed something that shouldn't exist, well, they risk everything: their credibility, their reputation, even their career. But Sarchi didn't really care. From his point of view, it wasn't his job to make a believer out of the skeptics. He had a job to do, and he was focused and moving forward with it. Which is why by the 2000s, he had become one of the most well-known cops in the world of demonology. He'd assisted in more than 25 exorcisms, performed hundreds of house cleansings, and trained others in what he called the work.
Officer Sarchi carries an exorcism kit containing holy water, special incense, and salt. For the demonic investigator, the devil is in the details. A special prayer from Pope Leo XIII. Scapula and holy metals to drive away the diabolic spirits.
He authored a book in 2001 called Beware the Night. In it, Sarchi laid out case after case, each one warning about what can happen when evil doesn't just influence people, it inhabits them. And interestingly, as it turned out, Sarchi wasn't the only cop in town seeing the unexplainable. Chris DeFlorio was a decorated NYPD officer and paramedic. And he'd spent years responding to emergencies, saving lives, and making arrests, all grounded things in the tangible real world. But then came a mission trip to Africa. There he encountered something he couldn't simply file away in a report. A man whose body moved in ways no human body should, twisting, slithering, producing sounds that weren't even human. And the strength he displayed was impossible to explain. DeFlorio says when he locked eyes with this guy, what he saw wasn't mental illness or rage. It was evil, pure, conscious evil. And that moment stayed with him. So when he returned to the U.S., DeFlorio began studying demonology and researching every documented case he could find. And from there, he brought something new to the field, a balance. See, he believed the church and mental health professionals needed to work together to discern whether a person's suffering was psychological or spiritual. And for a while, it was just research and just study, until one day, a call came in from inside his own precinct. At the 32nd Precinct in Harlem, you had 4 floors of concrete, fluorescent lights, and cops coming and going, filing reports and booking suspects. On the 4th floor, there was the bunk room, a space where officers could crash between shifts if needed. But that room had a little bit of a reputation, and people would hear things, and the vibe felt off. The kind of stuff that made officers rather drive home half asleep than spend a night up there. And no one talked about it officially, but everyone knew something was definitely wrong with that room. It was May 8th, 2020, in the middle of the night. A rookie officer had just finished his shift, and instead of driving home, he decided to catch some Z's up on the 4th floor. He stretched out on one of the couches, closed his eyes, and started to drift. And then he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy and deliberate, someone was walking behind the couch he was on. He sat up fast, but the room was empty. And trying to shake it off, he lay back down and shut his eyes again. And that's when it happened. Something grabbed his legs, and not a brush, but a grip. Firm, pressing him into the couch. The frame beneath him started to bounce like someone was jumping on it, but his legs were pinned tight. He could feel it all, the pressure, the movement, and yet there was no one there. He broke free eventually and jumped to his feet and hit the lights. That's when he says he saw it. A shadow, human-shaped, slipping through the doorway and disappearing down the hall like it had somewhere else to be. And later, when word got around, he learned the truth. That bunk room had been like that for years. So they called Chris DeFlorio, and 2 days after the rookie's encounter in the early morning hours when the precinct was at its quietest, DeFlorio climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, armed with his exorcism kit. The moment he stepped inside, he says he felt a presence so heavy it was almost physical. The rookie hadn't imagined it. Something had been in that room, maybe for years, feeding on fear. DeFlorio began the rite, commanding the entity to leave in the name of Christ. For nearly an hour, he prayed into the dark.
You have no power over anyone in this apartment. You know you're not fooling me. That's why you're not doing anything in here tonight. So do yourself a favor. In the name of Christ, you're banished from this place.
And slowly, the weight lifted. The room was still again. And since that night, no officer has reported anything unusual in the 4th floor bunk room. The New York Post later ran the story under the headline, NYC cop turned Ghostbuster reveals evil spirit at NYPD precinct.
I knew something was there, and I knew if I crossed over that threshold where that bunk room was, that I didn't know if I was going to come out. This officer was not, he wasn't over-exaggerating. It wasn't an emotional experience. Something happened, and something's in that room.
Now, some people read that and laughed, and others, well, they understand it's more than that. And a funny headline is only used to mask the terrifying reality that maybe men like Chris DeFlorio, like Ralph Sarchie, are onto something. That maybe throughout history and all across all religions, that talk of evil and spirits isn't just a metaphor. It's about a real thing that moves amongst us in ways we don't fully understand. But it takes brave men and women to put their reputations on the line, all in the name of getting the work done. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Everytown. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, remember to subscribe because that's the easiest way that really helps us out. Appreciate you very much. So thanks for tuning in. It means a lot. Remember to come back next week for another episode of Everytown filled with scary, strange, and mysterious stories. Because you never know. Maybe your town will be next.